You're watching DATV, bringing Brookline home.
The Safety Net. I'm Steve Bressler along with Susan Howards. As we're doing today's show, we are in the midst of the holiday season. We like to think that this is a time when everyone is smiling and getting along, full of holiday cheer, and that our family get-togethers could fit into a Norman Rockwell painting. But is that always the reality? Are there stresses around the holidays that lead to family dysfunction and emotional and maybe even physical violence? To help us with that discussion today, we have with us Jenny Efimova, who is the SafeLink Hotline and Outreach Manager at Casa Myrna, and Dr. Lloyd Gelano, who is the Human Services Coordinator with the Brookline Health Department. And welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, before we get into the discussion, the major part of our discussion, why don't you tell us about Casa Myrna and what that organization is all about, the services it has, and what you do there?
Sure. Casa Myrna is Boston's foremost provider of services to domestic violence survivors and their children. We provide a range of services. So we have residential programs, including an emergency shelter for those who don't have a place to stay or seeking a safe place to stay as a result of domestic violence. We also have a range of supportive services. So we have legal help, housing advocacy, self-sufficiency. We also have a counseling department, and we operate SafeLink, which is a statewide domestic violence hotline, which operates 24 hours a day. It's confidential, free of charge, and our advocates are there to connect callers to resources, to shelter if they're looking for a safe place to stay, and provide just any information that they may need.
Is there a number for SafeLink?
Absolutely. It's 1-877-785-2020.
Can you say it again?
1-877-785-2020. Great.
Super. How did you get involved?
Actually, I started as a volunteer at SafeLink 8 years ago. So I really felt that making that connection directly with survivors when they're calling, particularly the hotline being that first, often the first contact someone has with a resource, is really important. And you have this capacity to really be able to connect somebody to help who really, really needs it, because there's so much isolation involved in domestic violence, and so many survivors often feel alone, and the hotline really provides that link to services.
So here's the question then, because we see in the newspapers and on television, there's a holiday, families get together, and someone eventually takes out a gun and shoots someone because the person didn't like the way the turkey was sliced. Are holidays more stressful, in your opinion?
I mean, I think holidays are a stressful time for everyone. When you're looking at domestic violence, it's important to remember that it's not caused by any one event or any one thing. So it's really a pattern of behavior that takes place over a period of time in a relationship where one person wants to have power and control over their partner. And this pattern of behavior is abuse. And so there are many ways in which abuse can manifest itself. Obviously, physical abuse is what we think of most when we hear the term domestic violence, but there's obviously emotional abuse, verbal, financial, absolutely sexual, and those are just as damaging as physical. And so somebody can be facing or experiencing one or all of these forms of abuse. And so there can certainly be times within a relationship, for example, like the holidays, they can be a stressor. And so someone who is already experiencing domestic violence in their relationship, that abuse may be exacerbated as a result of the holiday time for whatever reason. There are multitudes of reasons why we find the holidays stressful. Similarly, if somebody has issues with an ex and they share custody, and so they now have to navigate the visitation and the family time and all of that, and so that can expose somebody to more risk as a result of the holidays. So I would say that holidays are a stressor, but certainly not a cause.
In your hotline, do you tend to get more phone calls during the holidays? I mean, big time?
That's a good question. Actually, our hotline call volume decreases during the holiday time, is what we've noticed. So I know that there's been mixed data about domestic violence during the holidays. Specifically for our hotline, we definitely every year during the holiday season we see a decrease in calls, and that partially is due to the fact that especially when there are children involved, a lot of survivors opt to kind of keep maybe the family or the current situation intact and not uproot their children or themselves during this time.
How about you, Lloyd? What do you see an increase in people just showing up or calling?
More people showing up but not necessarily for domestic violence reasons, more financial issues and stuff, and just relationship issues, but not to the threshold of domestic violence situation. Finances is the biggest one that gets people into my office, and it just wreaks havoc on families. So,
have you seen an increase in the number because of the economy in the past couple of years?
Yes, I see.
Significant?
Yes.
Lloyd?
Oh, yes. And it wasn't something that happened immediately. It was more of a gradual trend upwards.
Do you see any decline in it? Because supposedly the economy is improving.
Well, yes, that's on a national level, but on the micro level, people are still suffering. So, and it'll take a while for people to get back on their feet. But it's very stressful, especially around the holidays. And it's really surprising that we haven't seen a spike in domestic violence given not only the holiday season, but also the financial stress that's putting on the family as well. So.
Do you see an increase after the holidays on SafeLink? Does it pick up?
Generally, our call volume will go back to what we usually have, which is we take an average of 150 calls a day. So we have anywhere upwards of
statewide.
Yes.
150 calls a day?
Yeah, it can range from 100 to 150.
And how do you provide services if they need, say, emergency services to whatever number of the 150? I didn't realize that. I would think maybe 25, 30.
I mean, we're definitely a busy hotline. We're a statewide domestic violence hotline. We're the only statewide domestic violence hotline. Certainly, a lot of the local programs across the state have hotlines as well, and have ways that survivors can reach them in their neighborhoods and communities. But SafeLink really is designed to serve the entire state and really provide sort of a seamless access to services for survivors, because we're toll-free, we're confidential, we can connect survivors to any place across the state, any domestic violence program or anything else that they might need. And our technology allows us to do that so that someone doesn't have to call, a lot of different numbers. We can link them in sort of a three-way function, and then disconnect and leave the caller and the third party connected. So that's really useful when someone is, they're calling us, and let's say, there's a shelter space available, in a different part of the state. We can connect them directly there and, facilitate that access for them. So, we do have a really high volume of calls.
And are you also, I assume you work with the police all over the state?
We don't work with the police directly, I would say, any more than we work with any other social service provider. Police certainly do call us if they have somebody in the police station, if they require assistance, if they're working with the survivor. But we also work with healthcare professionals. We work with, various types of community organizations, even school counselors if they have somebody that they're working with that needs help. I mean, SafeLink is a great place to call because you can get information on any range of questions or any range of issues that somebody may be experiencing that are related to domestic violence.
Can you give us an idea of the types of questions you get?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can have somebody calling, asking questions about how to file a restraining order, right? So we connect them to, our legal department. Or somebody may be experiencing domestic violence and they're living in, let's say, subsidized housing, and that creates an issue for them. Obviously, housing is a big problem for a lot of people across the state. And when you're in a domestic violence situation and your home is not safe for you, that particularly is even more so. So we connect them to our housing advocate. If somebody is looking for maybe they're calling for the very first time and they don't even know where to start. So we kind of get an idea of everything that they're going through. We do a safety assessment with them. We find out sort of what is the situation that they're in, and then we also always ensure to connect them to their local agency so that they know somebody in their community that they can work with, and then they could, come in and make an appointment with and sit down and talk about, maybe creating a safety plan or maybe creating a plan to leave. I mean, leaving is a process. It's not something that happens overnight.
Exactly.
So a lot of survivors, really need to have a plan in place in order to be able to leave and do so mindfully and safely.
How many people are staffing the hotline at any given time?
We have anywhere from 2 to 3 advocates on throughout the day, and then we have at least 1 person on overnight, and also ranging between 2 and 3 on weekends. So we always have somebody 24 hours a day at our main office answering the hotline.
And these are primarily volunteers, or are they staff people?
Actually, they're all staff. We're fully staffed, and they're all trained domestic violence advocates.
Do you accept volunteers for any of your work?
We do. So we have different ranges. I mean, currently we have different capacities in which somebody can help out. So they can definitely contact us.
And just a question of follow-up. Is there a follow-up process? So you help somebody and then you sort of see where they are down the road?
That's also a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have that because we're anonymous and confidential. And so we try to really, really honor that because we don't take identifying information. We don't provide identifying information to our callers. We have a lot of repeat callers, a lot of people who have called us over and over again, and they can certainly share that they've called before, and they could, if you've spoken to somebody, you can kind of talk to them about what you've, sort of what you've gone through, what resources you've provided them, but we don't keep track.
Yeah.
When you say confidential information, you don't take names, but you
Yes.
obviously take locale where they are, because you
Yes.
have to have that to help them with shelters and whatever else. Children, you discuss children.
Sure. So we don't take identifying information in a way of names, addresses, phone numbers, but we certainly do collect data on our calls, and we try to make sure that we honor the confidentiality of our callers, and that our questions are not invasive, but really help inform the way we're going to provide services. So finding out where somebody's calling from is crucial.
Absolutely.
Yes. So town or city, certainly. Finding out whether they have children and how many children they have and what needs their children have at that moment is also crucial in order to provide them services. But again, it's really to help us inform the
So
resources.
you don't share any of that information, but
do
you
not.
do get some confidential, you have to get
Yes.
some confidential
Yes.
to do your job. Okay,
Yes.
I understand that now.
I'd like to go back to volunteer opportunities.
Sure.
What can your volunteers do? And how much training do you offer them specifically?
Well, we have not recruited volunteers for the hotline in recent months.
Right.
I will say that in the past, our volunteers have done essentially similar work to what our advocates do, and have gotten training. There is a sort of thorough domestic violence training that somebody would go through, and then also get training at the hotline.
Okay.
Who funds the hotline, Jenny?
Hotline.
State?
It's a combination of funding sources. One of our biggest funders is the Department of Children and Families.
Interesting.
You take contributions?
Absolutely.
You ask.
And do you have a
We
fundraiser?
absolutely
Does
do.
Casa Myrna have a fundraiser?
Yeah, we have a really wonderful department of 2 wonderful development professionals who fundraise for us, and certainly other staff as well. It's a team effort.
How many on staff at Casa Myrna?
About.
About.
I would say probably in the range of 40 to 50.
Really?
Wow, I didn't realize that.
And again, how many sites?
We have an emergency shelter, which is sort of an emergency safe place for someone to stay. We also have 2 transitional living programs, and one is for parenting teens. And those are really living programs that are for those who are transitioning out of emergency shelter but don't yet have their own housing. So those are longer term programs. So that's 3 residential programs, and then we have our main office where we have all of our supportive and community services, including the hotline.
Do not any of the shelters take families? Like a mother and her 4 children?
Sure, all of our shelters take families, and all of our shelters take children. All of our residential programs, absolutely.
And what about pets? Because now there's the new law that restraining orders can include pets.
Absolutely, and pets, you know, it's a really important subject for a lot of survivors. We hear it a lot at the hotline when somebody is in a domestic violence situation and wants to go into a shelter. You know, unfortunately, at the time, we don't have the capacity to take pets. There are not many shelters that do across the state or nationally. You know, I think it's definitely something very important to consider. I also think that when you look at, you know, an emergency residential setting, there are definitely some challenges that may arise with that, but hopefully we could, you know, look into that going forward.
It'd be interesting if there were ever pet shelters where you could leave your pet.
There's some.
There are.
I'm not an expert in that
shelters
area.
where the family stays, but if there would be just like kennels.
Sure.
I know we started the show talking about potential spikes in domestic violence during the holiday season, but I'm just overall on an annual basis, have you seen any changes in the numbers? Increasing, decreasing?
Over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, certainly. I mean, our hotline started in 2000. SafeLink's been around since fall of 2000, and our calls have increased every year, and I think that's a testament to a lot of things, including, you know, how widely the hotline has been known and utilized, and certainly it being a 24-hour resource is really something that you know, allows people to call at any time. But calls have definitely increased over the years.
Are your hotline folks multilingual?
Yes. So we are bilingual on a 24-hour basis. And we also have other languages available on staff. And we have access to an AT&T language line that allows us to get interpretation in over 140 languages.
That's
Do you do trainings for not for your own staff and such, but would you do trainings for businesses or private nonprofits that don't really focus on domestic violence, but where there should be an awareness?
Sure, and we definitely get requests about trainings quite a bit. You know, I've done trainings for other social service providers where where they have staff who work with a population and may see the issue of domestic violence, but that's not the primary focus that they're working with. So we're always really happy to do that because I think it's really, really important to bring awareness to the issue of domestic violence, particularly since it affects so many of us. You know, I always say that we're all either survivors or witnesses, and I think it's just really a matter of being able to notice and know exactly what it is and spot the signs, and then know what to do and where to go for help.
Fact or myth? Super Bowl Sunday is the worst day for domestic violence. To your experience.
You know, I don't have specific data, but I would probably lean towards myth.
Really?
I don't necessarily think that we've seen, again, I can't speak for, you know, other organizations or, you know, nationally. I know that at our hotline, we really have not seen a spike in calls or don't normally see a spike in calls during Super Bowl.
Yeah, I haven't checked the numbers for this year, but last year and years trending, it's always a decrease on Super Bowl Sunday.
Really?
Yeah.
So where did the myth originate?
It's a good question. Everyone wonders why. You know?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, the myth is like, you know, the guy, supposedly the guy sitting there with his bear watching a movie or the Super Bowl and his wife interrupts him and that happens. It's a myth.
You know, I think it's, you know, it's interesting that you say that. I think it sort of feeds into some bigger misconceptions we have about domestic violence, which is that, you know, these external factors cause the behavior, such as alcohol, such as, you know, watching of sports or, you know, whatever that may be. But really, in fact, again, as, you know, when you look at the dynamic of domestic violence, you know, it's really a pattern. It's about power and control. And abuse is a tactic. So abuse is a tactic. It's a means to an end. And the end is to have power and control over your partner. So it's a very willful act. It's an act that somebody, you know, consciously decides. And, you know, abusers abuse is a choice, okay? And so again, there could be a stressor. Certainly, if somebody's under financial strain or consumption of alcohol, that's a stressor. But domestic violence in and of itself is not caused by this. And I think when we talk about the Super Bowl, we're kind of thinking on this again. It was mentioned, just that somebody comes home and
just to be clear, it doesn't. We're not saying it doesn't exist. We're going to say that it's not a spike. All right. So it just.
That's right. Absolutely.
Do you get phone calls? Does the hotline get phone calls from young people, teenagers, let's say in dating relationships?
We get calls from a range of survivors, certainly. I mean, at this juncture in time, we're not specifically geared for teens, and I think teens have different methods of communication that aren't necessarily, they may not necessarily utilize hotline services as much, but we have definitely gotten calls from teens. I think teen dating violence is also a very important issue, a very pressing issue for teens. And so, again, I mean, it essentially has the same, dynamics as domestic violence. And so we have, yes, to answer your question.
Well, actually, just thinking we're talking about kids and young folks actually use different ways of communicating. Has Casa Marina actually sort of adapted some of the web-based communication?
Social media?
Social media.
I mean, we certainly have. Yep. I mean, we do have social media. We are, we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter, and we do realize that, particularly teens communicate in different ways. When we have done training for teens and teen audiences, our training curriculums have been adjusted, and we make sure that, we can communicate to teens and relate and make that material accessible to them.
What about elders? Do you get calls from elders about domestic violence? Seniors, elder abuse?
Sure, we do. Absolutely. I mean, I would say the majority of our calls are really about intimate partner violence, but we certainly do.
You have a website?
Yes.
What's your website?
It's www.casamirna.org.
Okay.
Yes.
And how would someone follow you on Facebook or Twitter?
Just search Casa Mirna on Facebook or Twitter. And we're on there, and that's CASAMYRNA.
If someone wanted to make a financial contribution,
that would be wonderful.
And how would that person go about doing that?
They can go to our website. Again, that's casamirna.org. And there is, I think, a very big donate now option that they can select. And certainly make a donation online, which is very, very easy.
Do you have any kind of a holiday drive for toys for kids or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our development department would probably be better versed to talk about the specific details around that. But we have some really great organizations that we've had, ongoing relationships with over the years who do, workplace gift drives. So that's really, really wonderful support because obviously we have a lot of kids in our shelters and their moms as well, and so we're really lucky enough to be able to get enough gifts to have them available for the kids and the moms as well.
Is there anything about Casa Marina that you feel that the audience should know that we haven't discussed yet? Anything come to mind?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing to remember that I would really want both survivors and people in general to know about, if you know somebody who's going through a domestic violence situation, is that there's help out there and that they're not alone. And I think that there is, agencies like Casa Marina. There are a lot of other agencies across the state who work in their communities that are, they do very important work. And so sometimes it just takes a phone call, and it's an incredibly important step and takes, a lot from someone, but that we're available and we're here to help.
But I think the anonymity and the confidentiality of SafeLink really would give a lot of security to people who otherwise would be reluctant to pick up the phone to call some of these other agencies. And I think that's a really, really wonderful thing. I think SafeLink really, the fact that it's statewide is amazing, just amazing, and that it's used.
Yes.
That's,
absolutely, that's true.
Well, Casa Marina is certainly one of the premier organizations that we've always known about and heard about when we're discussing the topic of domestic violence. We're really glad that Casa Marina is functioning as well as it is. We're getting close, actually, to the end of the show. Lloyd, what do you have to say for our audience about domestic violence in the holidays?
Well, actually, this is germane not just for domestic violence situations, but people in general. Although it's supposed to be a very happy season, it's very stressful. You need to take care of yourself, go for walks, remove yourself from the situation, and minimize the drinking. Those are the issues that get people into trouble. So.
And call SafeLink if you need help, or if you know somebody, a loved one or a friend who's going through this situation. Just give us a call.
Give us the number again.
877-785-2020.
Your
and
turn.
we're toll free.
I would echo what Lloyd is saying, but I would also say to try to monitor the finances. You don't need the most expensive sneaker. You don't need the most expensive iPad, whatever the latest technology is. There have to be some breaks on the spending, particularly in this economy.
Yeah, this economy, I mean, those financial stresses are really
And one more thing, if you
killer.
can, give something to your local food pantry. That's really, really critical, even in Brookline, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
If you could share some of the cranberry sauce or whatever it is you're doing for Christmas, take it over to the food pantry.
Well, this has been a very productive discussion we've had here today. I'm really thrilled that we could have you here, Jenny and Lloyd. Susan and I had talked about having Casa Myrna on the show for a long time. It's been a while since we had anyone from Casa Myrna here.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you both
coming.
for having us. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And Lloyd, thank you for coming again. Lloyd's one of our steady guests now.
I enjoy coming here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season from Susan and myself.
safe holiday.
And a safe, absolutely safe holiday season. See you next time.